In today's episode, we discuss mental health, dealing with depression, the importance of asking for help, the power of mindset in depression and in life, how to overcome hard times, and more. If you've enjoyed the episode, or if you've enjoyed the podcast so far, please hop on and leave us a quick podcast review. And if you haven't yet, please check out the book that started it all, Renaissance Wisdom, How to Flourish in the Modern Day, now available on Amazon. Today's show is brought to you by Icepod, finally an affordable, portable, and effective way to get the benefits of cold water immersion in the comfort of your own home. I opted for the Pro Bundle, which includes the Icepod, a water circulating pump, a special insulated lid, and a thermometer to check the temp of your water. Even in Georgia, the Icepod keeps my water between 60 and 70 degrees, and when I load it up with the 36-pack of water bottles that I use and refreeze after each session, I can easily get it around 50 degrees for the perfect cold water immersion experience. Despite being light and portable, the Icepod is super durable, and it's the perfect solution for anyone who wants to experience the benefits of cold water immersion without spending thousands of dollars for a home water chiller or trying to DIY your own. Cold immersion can help with recovery and muscle soreness, raise dopamine levels, help you wake up and be more alert, help you to burn more calories, mobilize brown fat, and more. Visit podcompany.com and use my special promo code SHANE50107 for $10 off your order, and each sale helps to support the show as well. Stay cool out there, people. Are you looking for the perfect high-protein snack that isn't loaded with stuff like MSG, nitrates, and sugar? Carnivore Snacks is the perfect high-protein snack made from quality grass-fed beef and salt. That's it. Each bag uses 1 pound of high-quality beef, lamb, pork, or chicken, salt, and nothing else. Aside from being easy, healthy, and convenient, they also taste great. These snacks are not just another jerky. They are way better. Give a bag a try, and I know you'll keep coming back. Check out Carnivore Snacks, spelled with an X.com, and enter coupon code SHANE05137 for 15% off your order, and each sale will help support the Renaissance Wisdom podcast as well. Welcome to the Renaissance Wisdom podcast, where ancient and modern wisdom come together to create a better way of living. I'm your host, Shane Sorensen, and each week we speak with successful people from a plethora of disciplines in search of wisdom from their own lives. Your own personal renaissance begins today. Let wisdom be your guide. Hey everybody, welcome to the Renaissance Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Shane Sorensen. I'm here with today's guest, Mike Kogan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shane. Pleasure to be here. True privilege, actually. I'm really happy to be talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm excited too. I know we were supposed to link up about, I guess, a couple weeks back, and something came up. So I'm glad I get to kind of pick your brain a little bit today.
Sure. Something always comes up, right? That's life.
Yeah, that's true. So why don't you start off? Just tell us a little bit about you, your background, any important info that we maybe should know about you.
Oh, man. My background, I feel like I'm the last person that should be in the spotlight, but I think I do have a diverse background. Let's put it this way. I graduated from Drexel. I've been living in Philadelphia area since, I guess, 1990. So that's a long time already. I'm an old man, but I went to Drexel, which is my first, let's call it first education, and I graduated with a degree in business and finance in '96, believe it or not. So that's a long time ago again. And I've worked in all kinds of fields. We're basically all business related, which included sales, which included marketing, which included even a lot of finance work, such as stock market and all kinds of stuff. And you can probably tell, which I still carry a bit of an accent, but I was not born here. I was actually born in Russia. Mm-hmm. Although I've lived majority of my life here, I'm still stuck with that accent, probably for the rest of my life. But upon graduating, like I said, I've had a lot of business types of jobs. And in early 2000s, I switched more into technology and more into marketing slash technology type of field, where basically I worked in early early adaptation of websites, social media, whatever else was coming around, and primarily was really websites initially. And I was really big into writing content, like writing stuff, written and otherwise creation of content, and which was surprising to me. As I mentioned, I wasn't born here, but for some reason it kind of came to me really easily to
Mm.
write content in English, which is no longer an issue today, as we know, because writing content isn't became an easier thing with AI. But back in the day, you may remember, or maybe you don't remember, but it was a big challenge to come up with original, nice, creative content, which I was really good at. So I kind of switched more into that, and I've progressed when it comes to technology and marketing. I've progressed more into Google marketing, online marketing, and integration of social media and online marketing into one type of business. And from there on, and I kind of like stayed with technology, and it progressed as technology developed. I kind of progressed with it. So over the last few years, we actually started creating apps, started creating websites, technology, and apps all integrated into one, and then promoting all that stuff online. I mentioned to you before, but it's funny, like when you mentioned about my background, throughout all these things, throughout all these, jobs and education and business and finance and where else, I always kind of noticed that what I really, truly, truly loved was dealing with people. And it's interesting that, some people will say sales is about people. Yeah, absolutely. It's still business. But what I noticed is I always enjoyed the actual process of listening to people, trying to understand what makes people tick.
Mm-hmm.
And I caught myself, talking to people about Google or about marketing or technology, but really trying to understand trying to analyze why they feel down today, why they feel up today, what's going on with them truly on a personal level. Maybe that's something, and I kind of felt that maybe that's something I should be doing more of, because I truly enjoy. And it's interesting that a lot of people will tell you, if you do what you love, you're not really working. You never work a
Mm-hmm.
day in your life if you do what you truly enjoy. And I caught myself liking that more and more and more. So funny enough, about 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, I forget when, but I went back to school in my advanced years of 45 years old. I went back into college and started taking psychology courses, believe it or not. So I said, I almost like started from scratch. And I completed my undergraduate degree in psychology with a focus on mental health. It was interesting, and then I enjoyed it so much. And as part of the degree, I kind of started working part time basis, more of a like a volunteering type of function at a mental health counseling practice. And then I started actually working at two different ones at the same time. And I found that I try to get more time dedicated to it, and I'm trying to sneak away from my main job, which is again websites, technology, marketing, whatnot, to do that for free, and I enjoyed every bit of it. And you know, I decided to continue my education, and actually am a couple of months away from completing the master's degree, also in psychology and mental health counseling, which is what I truly love. Like a lot of times people will ask you, what do you want to do on a daily basis? If you had like a perfect day, if you could wake up and have a perfect day, that would be my perfect day. Just do sessions all day long, talk to people, preferably in person, even though today Zoom is much more prevalent. But I love this human interaction. I love talking to people. I love kind of reading people and trying to help people at the same time. But that's kind of like and a lot of times people will tell you better late than never.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm actually 51 years old right now, and I'm like, what, maybe this is what I should have been doing from my earliest years. But it is what it is. But that's where I kind of find myself today, doing what I like more and more and more. Still not on a full time basis, but actually progressing to that point.
Sure. Yeah, I think I think it's very cool. Later in life, right? You still made that change up, right? Because I think a lot of people have a passion or have something that speaks to them deeply, and they'll put it off to the point where I don't know if it's ever too late, right? Like you said, better late than never, but they put it off so long that it just becomes insurmountable almost to try to do that. So I think it's cool that you recognized that and made that switch when you did.
Absolutely. And I wish, and I cannot remember who said that to me, but someone said to me that one of my interviews or someone I was talking to, they said, look, in about 10 years, you're going to look back and say, I wish I did this 10 years ago. And you
Yeah.
have those 10 years right now. And I figured, okay, I was 45 or whatever I was at the time. Let me do this. Let me do this one step at a time. And it's also, someone said to me, it's interesting, even though I try to talk to people and I try to help them, a lot of times they actually end up helping me. And I pick up a great deal of knowledge from people when they, you know, inadvertently tell me something that sticks with my mind. And they tell me, listen, it's not too late. It's all a matter of taking that first step. Like it's about a matter of doing something. Something isn't seems completely improbable, impossible. It's just too much to accomplish. You can't do it. It just cannot be done. Take one smaller step. Break it into smaller steps and take
Yeah.
one step. No matter how insignificant, no matter how little it seems, how yeah, okay, I did this. Doesn't matter. Take it. Take it, take it, take it. And then from there, you can kind of go on and you can discover where else. And suddenly, when you do that first step, your perception may change. And it's interesting how our perception as human beings, we change on a daily basis. Something that seemed completely improbable or impossible suddenly appears, well, you know what? Yeah, maybe I could. I don't know. You never know. You never know. It's not a simple thing.
Yeah, the small steps are like absolutely crucial in the process, and the little victories, you build your confidence. I'm sure going back to school, in your 40s, the first thing you're like, how am I going to balance working full time and doing this? And then you're like, maybe you have those doubts in your head, and then you go in and you knock out your first class, and then, well, I did one class, maybe I can do two next semester, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do this, and
Yeah,
you build from that. But like you said, if you never take that first step, if you never go out a limb on and just try, 10 years go by and you're looking back and you're thinking, I wish I would have done it 10 years ago. But
yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think it applies to everything. It's just a matter of sometimes kind of like doing actually taking action instead of talking about it, and it
sure.
feels totally different when you actually do take action, and you kind of you feel like a different person. I think all of us kind of like the way we kind of look at stuff, visually, mentally, is sometimes different than when you actually start doing it. Then you realize that the perception you had of that event or that thing is not exactly what it really is. So it's kind of like almost like tricking yourself into doing something. And it's funny. I don't know. You probably watch. I'm sure you watch a lot of motivational, a lot of educational videos online. There's a general, some famous general whose name I will never remember, talking about making your bed in the morning. Saying, what the hell is the difference if you make your bed in the morning, you don't make your bed in the morning. You're saying that if you do make your bed in the morning, it's like a first accomplishment. You kind of feel like you did something you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you can set a next goal and it's the next goal. So it's like little insignificant, smaller things, which suddenly amount to a lot of stuff. You look at the old times, because I know you look at, like you said, Renaissance. You look at a lot of wisdom over the years. You look at in the old days, old Greece, older culture, Roman Empire, whatever. They built buildings that are still around, that are still architecturally likely superior to what we probably are building today. Who knows? But truthfully, you look at that and you kind of see like to them it probably seemed impossible to accomplish certain things like that. But it kind of took inspiration, and then they kind of went from one step to the next to the next step. Next thing you know, they created absolute masterpieces that are still around, that still amaze us, until today. It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me what little steps can accomplish overall.
Yeah, there's a saying that how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? The way
Right.
the pride that you put into something as small as keeping your environment clean. And I'm sure you've seen this in mental health, right? Like I have a lot of I have depression that runs in my family and things like that. And every once in a while, I'll have a day where I'm just feeling kind of blue out of nowhere. But uh, I've definitely noticed that a lot of times your environment is kind of like a reflection of your inner state. If you're feeling very stressed or very depressed, you tend to see a lot more like clutter showing up. Your house looks like a mess, and even just the act of kind of cleansing your home or reorganizing your closet or a little thing like that can really shift your mood somehow. Just part of being immersed in the environment, but also just the act of, like you said, just kind of hitting a little victory, doing something that needed to be done.
Absolutely. It's about little victories. It's about control. It's about doing something you feel like you're in control of. And that's a lot of times when we talk to people that have depression, we kind of deal with that exactly from that standpoint. We kind of say, listen, what is it that you do control? What is it that you do feel proud of? What is actually positive? Take inventory of positive things in your life. Reset. Kind of like, in other words, sit back and say, all right, listen, a lot of things in my life might be a total mess, but what is it that what's really good right now? What is it that I can really go and touch right now today? Can I, again, like you said, can I clean up my park? Can I open the window and can I get some sunlight into my room? Whatever it is, smaller things. But suddenly you're like, well, you know what? And a lot of it is actually humor. Funny enough, I like to infuse humor and just get, because once you start smiling for a different reason, you're not even smiling about your life, but you kind of like set yourself in a different mode. The way you are, the way you like approach everything, could change the way the outcome is. You know what I mean? Like the way things progress from any given point is exactly your decision. It's what you choose to focus. You choose to focus on the negative, which is always, there's a lot of it. You know what I mean? And that's, you can, if you choose to kind of stick with the negative, there's plenty to choose from. But you can actually isolate some positive things and focus on them. Focus on them and build from there. And that's one thing I discovered about, like I mentioned to you, mental health. I discovered that I'm more of a positive psychology proponent. In other words, I kind of
Mm.
focus on, I try to identify positive things about a person, and then say, why don't you focus on that, and then let's build on that. Let's grow on that. Instead of obviously being realistic, like not just gaslight, not just giving somebody fake statements or fake hopes or whatever. No, there's always something positive about each person, and and that's what actually helps me deal with a lot of guys. Because as I mentioned to you previously, I work a lot with depressed people. I work a lot with PTSD, people that suffer from PTSD, veterans, police, firefighters that are retired, and I had a bunch of people that have survived 9/11, and I mean it's just, the list goes on and on and on. And but it's funny, it's all the same. It's all about perception. It's all about how they view themselves, how, and they're totally justified in feeling how they're feeling, because they went through total hell,
Yeah.
total pure, complete hell. And but then the question becomes: do you focus on that? Do you stay in that frame of mind, or can you change
Mm.
your perspective, your perception, and can you move on? Can you move on to better things, because you have so much to offer to others? You know what I mean? And that's, to me, that's always been the point of kind of like encouraging people on a realistic basis and giving them something positive to focus on. And that's why working with veterans have proven so effective and so interesting. And you mentioned, and as I mentioned to you also, is the fighters. Like, the reason why I talk to a lot of fighters and athletes in general is that I found there's a lot of similarities, believe it or not, between athletes and veterans and people that have experienced PTSD, because fighters, they go to war, so to speak. They go to kind of this battle,
Hmm.
and then they come out and they have to adjust back to normal, regular life. And that experience to me is so unique and so interesting. There's so many aspects of it that people don't really focus on. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's become more of a focus in the society today as well.
Yeah. For fighters, right? I can see kind of like the correlation there because you have someone that dedicates their entire life towards a goal or a dream of becoming a world champion or whatever their specific goal is. And then inevitably, anything that is age based or time based, as we get older, our bodies start to break down. We don't perform as well. And there's inevitably a point where we have to step out of whatever that pursuit was. And I guess it's a very extreme example of kind of what happens when your life has had one purpose for many, many years. And then that purpose has to shift because suddenly you're not able to pursue the thing that you pursued before.
Exactly.
It makes me think a lot. One of the books that I would always recommend if I had to pick two books, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. It's an extreme example, right, of how you can essentially lose everything and you're kind of faced with a decision, whether conscious or not, that you can either choose to focus on everything that was lost, everything that went wrong, everything from the past that maybe didn't work out the way you wanted it to, or you can choose to focus on the positive aspects, as you mentioned, trying to rebuild, to find some meaning, to create some meaning in your own life and your own journey and continue on. I think
You
that's
said it exactly. It's one of my favorite books. Funny enough, you mentioned Viktor
mm-hmm,
Frankl, and being Jewish, I've researched a lot into that and why the Holocaust in general, and just if you think about his words, what he wrote about, it's all about having like when people have if people don't have meaning in life, the whole purpose becomes questionable and they don't know what to do with themselves. Some people
mm-hmm,
fill that void with pleasure. It's interesting because some people just don't focus on the meaning and they just go for whatever is there, which is how substance abuse came to be so prevalent in society. But I think more than that, it's all about finding the meaning in your world, and everyone has it. It's just sometimes it's not so clearly visible. And you, like you said, the extreme example of people in the concentration camps, like Viktor Frankl, you kind of expose the true bare nature of each person. You see exactly what each person is, and that's where you kind of see who is who. And it's very, like you said, it's very similar to the veterans. It's very similar to some fighters who kind of go and they have one single purpose, one single meaning. And I spoke to veterans. It's funny enough, and I'll introduce you to some very interesting characters because there's a gentleman that I work with and speak with all the time who is a former Marine, and he talks a lot about the fact that for years they kind of make you groom you to become this killing machine, become completely desensitized,
mm-hmm.
completely have no emotions other than following orders and doing what you're supposed to be doing for a good reason most of the time. Obviously, being in the army and all that.
Sure.
But when you come back to this. You sign off and you come back to the real life, so to speak. What do I do? I have no idea what to do, and they try to. It's a matter of them, acquiring the next mission because everything else could be. You could still use the same discipline
Mm-hmm.
to get to the next mission. Just a question of identifying what that mission is and sticking to that program and becoming, because a lot of these guys are so great and they're so valuable and so disciplined and so strong mentally that they can share that strength and really help other people,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot of them end up doing. It's really. I actually admire veterans so much because I work, as I mentioned to you before, I work a lot with veterans just to really help them because I feel like it's almost like we owe them a bit of
Yeah.
a bit of gratitude, but more than that, we owe them on a daily basis to help them because they've been helping us and they've helped us so much over the years by keeping us safe and sacrificing themselves. It's interesting. A lot of fighters will tell you. One person I interviewed is an older fighter, long retired, Don Fry, who was an early UFC champion, an absolute beast in the fighting world, and
Yeah.
it's just incredible. So simply like but the man, not just the physical, but the mental. Like he would not stop. He fought in the early UFC, then he went to Japan, won a lot of fights there, had a lot of physical problems, and now he's kind of like obviously not in physical shape anywhere near, but he went through a lot of problems of this identity crisis, so to speak. He didn't know who he was anymore. He's like, what do I do now? Who am I? And his words are like, he went through that, he overcame that, and he's doing much better today. But he's like, listen, anytime there's a veteran or anyone else needs help, you simply pick up a phone and call me. Let's talk to that person together. They want to share that strength and that inspiration and that experience overcoming the identity crisis and help others. Because this, I felt like what I've discovered is this desire to help others is like fire. That when you share fire,
Mm-hmm.
it does not diminish the source. Like it starts a new fire, but the original fire still keeps going strong the same way as was. So it's the same thing with this. I think you can help 1,000 people and still remaining as motivated and as positive as you were beforehand. You know, what I mean, it's just so inspiring to me. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think Buddha said something along those lines of
Yeah,
like it's like it's like a candle or something like that. When you somebody has a candle and it's extinguished and you light yours, it doesn't take your flame away. It
right.
just kind of multiplies the flame. It just continues to spread it.
Totally. And
And
you notice what happens when you light someone else's fire. For a moment, there's actually a synergy, and they actually get stronger. Both of them get stronger. It's
right.
interesting, but yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
We're definitely meant I gravitate towards I think being a little bit solitary just because through my experiences, I found that sometimes relationships with like other human beings, even friendships, take a lot of energy from me. But I'm a little bit more of like an introvert. I think I
Yeah,
moved around a lot as a kid, so I think that also affected it because when you're constantly moving schools, you have a friend and then you move to a different school and that friend's gone and you're 13, so it's not like you can really just hop in a car and that this is
right.
also before Facebook or anything. I mean, I think MySpace was just coming out around those years, so
Yeah,
um, was a little different. But I mean, I definitely, as I'm getting older, I'm 34 now, so still got a lot of years ahead of me, but live just enough to kind of realize that I'm not just like a spring chicken anymore, and you lose some of that like just hopeless romanticism. You get a little bit more realistic, but still have a good worldview. And uh, I'm realizing as I get older that it's super important that the relationships that we build with people, right? And um, it's I guess when I was younger, I kind of viewed it as relationships were kind of like what can I get out of them, and sometimes
right.
it's not about getting something out. Sometimes it's just about lending a hand to somebody or making a connection, and really small things like you were saying about getting up and making your bed, like equally just telling somebody, hey, like everything okay, and genuinely asking them, not just how are you,
Right.
because everybody does that.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm fine, whatever. But actually asking someone like, hey man, like, is everything good? Are you all right? That can mean the world to somebody because we can go through. I mean, you can see a homeless person or a good example, right? Like there was a guy recently in London that got stabbed, and he was like bleeding out, and there's a guy filming it on his phone, and then there's another guy that was just sitting there drinking his coffee. It was at like a Starbucks. He didn't even move. The guy's like spurting out there on the ground, and it's like we become so ingrained in what we're doing, and also kind of like we're so busy we think someone else is going to take care of it. Well, like I'm sure that guy has a friend, or I'm sure that guy has a family member that's going to check on it. But sometimes people don't. They just maybe they've
exactly.
had a rough life. They've cut off connections. Maybe they've made some mistakes. And honestly, I mean, for someone that's going through a mental health crisis or going through a hard time, someone genuinely just taking 2 minutes to say, "Is everything okay? How are you actually doing?" I mean, that can be the difference between someone sticking around or not.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So well said, and it's exactly what it is. And obviously, that in London, that's an extreme example. Someone literally dying, but sometimes, like you said, it could change someone's day entirely if you just give them a positive smile, a positive word, or something, anything. It doesn't matter. And like you mentioned in your example, relationships are difficult, especially in younger age, and you were moving a lot. So a lot of times you develop this defensive
Hmm.
defensive posture of saying, I don't want to even start a relationship because it's not going to last. So why even go in there? So you kind of become this a little bit protective and that kind of shapes your mental attitude for the rest of your life. But that could be adjusted, that could be changed, and as you go through different experiences, it kind of it evolves into the next stage. That's not forever, but you're so right. People have become that same word that I used before, desensitized. Like, because we become, unfortunately, society as a whole has become more experience based. In other words, whatever happens, it's also like a TV show. Yeah, let's see, the next fight or the next that. So become more into looking for experiences rather than connecting with each other and trying to draw strength and give strength back to another person. I think in the older days, when you talk about the wisdom of the past, I think a lot of time people were more connected with
Mm-hmm.
each other.
Yeah.
So not necessarily always perfectly, whatever, but I think we were more, even our generation, or even obviously generations before, hundreds of years ago, they were always more in tune with each other and more connected with each other. And I think that's part of what's going on today. When, as you know, I work in social media, still work in Google. Being online entirely, I think, changes us as people, and I think
Yeah.
becomes more, like I said, like a game, like a movie, that where you kind of like, you don't look at people as real people, and you look at almost like action figures online. You're like, oh, cool, look at that guy. He's on the rail tracks, and there's a train coming. Let's see. Oh, is it gonna, like, it's unbelievable. You look at it, but you don't think anything is real anymore. You don't
Yeah.
think anything is realistic, and you kind of like becomes more of a, like, a fantasy instead of a real life. But it's amazing that we're still the same people that we were 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago. Just have more technology around us, but we're the same human beings with the same emotions, same fears, same positive hopes, and everything else. We kind of like have to kind of sometimes have to dig into that and dig a little bit deeper in these days to find it and get it up to the surface and focus on that. It's interesting. One of the interviews I had, I don't know if you know this person, George St. Pierre, was a
Oh yeah.
UFC champion.
Yeah. He was like my favorite when I was. I'm a jujitsu guy, so I did some MMA many years ago.
Okay,
And
so you know who that is,
yeah,
obviously.
he was the man when I was training and stuff. So that's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be GSP.
And believe it or not, I'm the same way. So I trained jiu-jitsu in late 1990s and early 2000s with Hoist Gracie,
Awesome.
who was in Philadelphia twice a month, and he had a school, somebody else. But my hero going after that, obviously, was exactly that, George St. Pierre. Why?
Yeah.
Because not only he's a great fighter, but he's a great person.
Professional too. Just
Incredible.
yeah.
And so think about me, right? So here I am, doing my marketing stuff. I'm working with athletes. I'm doing different things. We have a mutual friend that I'm sitting with this guy talking about something completely unrelated. And then somebody walks by. I don't really pay attention all the time because I focus on who I'm talking to. There's a guy sitting with us. There's like 6, 7 people. We're talking, and then I hear, and then I look. I say, "Wait a minute, who is that?" Is actually George St. Pierre. Turns out we have a mutual friend who I was meeting at the time. He came to talk to him as well in New York. Can you imagine? So the same as you, this is my hero.
Yeah.
Here he's talking just really, BSing about nothing, just so completely social situation. I'm sitting with my mouth open. I'm like, wow, wait a minute, that it is actually George St. Pierre. So I hooked up with him. I had a couple of interviews that I did for the mental health and other purposes, but I found him to be, forget about fighting, but as a person, oh my
Yeah.
God, what an amazing human being. First of all, incredibly positive, very much down to earth, but so positive and so like focused on whatever he's like. Nothing will distract him. Like, he's actually the most determined human being I've ever seen, and that's why, like, when he focuses on something, that's it. Nothing matters. He was telling me, like, when he practices, when you mentioned jiu-jitsu, when you practice, you do different things, repeat them over and over and over and over. He was saying that he will do less repetition, but he'll focus on that move being perfect. He will not he will not proceed to the next thing until he gets that move perfectly, even if it takes him 6, 7 hours. That's why his training partners would go crazy. We're like, we got to do other stuff. No, I'm not doing anything else until I get this perfectly. And he mentioned something else he's like, he like nothing to him. It's all about positive outlook, and he's like, you know what? I had injuries, I had defeats. He's, as you know, he's the only person that kind of like overcame. He beat everyone that defeated him. In other words, he got defeats in the fighting, and he came back and beat that same person to kind of like. And funny enough, it was more to prove to himself than to anybody else. He said, you know, I couldn't live with myself knowing that I could do this, and I'm gonna go away not accomplishing that. And that was his thing. Like he was saying, look, I it's all about me versus me. You know, I mean, I'm my biggest opponent, and it's amazing to hear that. You know, the most inspiring person you can ever meet.
Yeah, so, something that was so impressive about him too was like, for example, I mean, he was the first person that really stood out to me, you know, that was like a real mixed martial artist. Like up until that point, there were a lot of guys who had, you know, one or two strengths. You know, you had like Matt Hughes who would just go out and just, you know, take everybody down and pound them, and you had some jiu-jitsu experts and some striking experts, but you know, George St. Pierre came out and he was doing everything. He was out wrestling, you know, national champ wrestlers. I know that, you know, in Canada, he became like an Olympic alternate, and he never wrestled. He never wrestled in high school. He never wrestled in college. So to get to a Olympic level and you've never even, I mean, that's insane. And he, you know, he's also a black belt.
Dedication.
Yeah, super high level. I think maybe when he started fighting, I think maybe he was still a brown belt, or I don't know if he had gotten his black belt yet. But I know he was training out with like Henzo Gracie, and I still see him training with Gordon Ryan and stuff now. Like he trains out with the Danaher Death Squad, and you know, and then his striking obviously was just a whole nother level. I mean, he's out there knocking people out and just really, really technical fighter all around. So definitely is a
It's amazing.
testament to hard work, right? Because you can't, not a lot of people like never wrestle for their life and become a Olympic alternate. You know, just to get to that kind of a level through it's just a testament to hard work, right?
Total hard work, and he will tell you himself. But there's another person that you may know I spoke with, is Mark Coleman, who was a
Mm-hmm.
UFC heavyweight champ, and he's long retired. Obviously, had a lot of health problems, but he loves talking about George St. Pierre. I don't know why, because even though he was before him, they say he actually is inspiring to him. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And he said what's in, because Mark Coleman actually was an Olympic wrestler, and he said what he saw, and he spoke to George St. Pierre. He said George realized early on in his career, because he was more of a striker. He was a karate background. He was, you know, like totally into striking. He realized that in order to become a UFC champ or any kind of champion, he has to learn wrestling. He said he totally secluded himself and went to wrestling and jiu-jitsu mindset entirely. He didn't do anything else. And he trained completely, like, in other words, he totally shut down everything else. He focused on that. He said, until I become an Olympic level wrestler, my life doesn't exist. And that's interesting. We look at his successes today and his successes early on. Before that, he was, believe it or not, broke. He had no money. He would travel, like you said, to New York to train with those guys for jiu-jitsu. Literally go over the weekend, you know, save enough money doing other odd jobs to travel to New York and roll with people that are far superior to him, whom he could probably beat in the stand-up, but they were much more superior in the wrestling or grappling. He would spend the entire, 48, 72 hours with them, learning, and then hop back on the bus or train or whatever and go up to Canada to get back to work. It's incredible to me. But the
Mm-hmm.
dedication you're talking about, month after month after month, and staying positive, always staying positive, always smiling. Like he'll stop, and exactly as you said, that if someone needs help, someone needs an inspiration, someone needs whatever, he's like, yeah, I'm there. He doesn't have to. He absolutely does not have to. But he'll support that person. In fact, you probably see online, he had a lot of bullying problems early in his life.
Mm-hmm.
So he later on he met people that bullied him, the people that actually abused him as a child, and he was trying to help them. He said, "I'll give them money, like I'll help them. It doesn't matter." And I think that's interesting that focus, that mindset, that whole perception of the world is why people could choose to be successful or not. You know, I mean, it's not just about his physical ability. It's really about his mental ability, and which shows. And then to this day, it's interesting. He hasn't changed. Like, he's the same guy that was at the top at the most successful period of his life. He's the same guy today, and but they go through pure. Can you imagine what they go through? Some of these wars, some of these
No, no.
deaths that they endure. It's incredible to us. We don't even understand, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. And there's a couple things you touched on there. Like, one is that it's so easy to not acknowledge all of the things that someone does behind the scenes to get where they are. Like, when we're comparing ourselves to someone else, imagine you're a fighter that's starting out and you're getting tapped out by white belts in jiu-jitsu. It's really, really easy to feel like you're the center of the universe, and you're like, I suck, I'm so terrible, why am I doing this? And forget that even a guy like GSP had the same experience, right? He was a high level kickboxer, karate guy that walks into a jiu-jitsu school for the first time, and some white belts probably tapping him out. And there's two mindsets you can always go into anything in life, right? Like, if you're working a job and you get laid off from your job, one person, in that situation, they're like, this is my livelihood, this is everything I worked for, what am I going to do? They get depressed, they start drinking, they lose their car, they lose their house, like, all these things stack up because they're so focused on the loss, or what happened, versus same person, different situation. They lose their job and they say, okay, now I need to get back to the drawing board. What do I need to do? And maybe they take that opportunity to go start a business of their own, and maybe it's tough for a while, and they're just barely paying the bills, maybe they're running up some debt, but eventually there's that moment that they break through, and then everybody will only focus on the success of that person. Oh, look at how much money he makes, his business, and they forget, or they don't see, right? Because it happens in private, right? Like, our failures kind of happen in private a lot of times, versus everyone just wants to see the success.
And that's what it's all about. It's all about that attitude. It's about the way what you focus on. Like I said earlier, it's an interesting example. You look at a person. I always use this analogy in my sessions. If you look at the person that is skiing, you're going down a slope
Mm-hmm.
in the skis, and you and there's like a bunch of trees up ahead, and you got to get through those trees, right? If you just keep going straight, you're going to crash into the tree. So you don't focus on the trees, you focus on the path. So you look at the path. If you
Yeah.
focus on the trees, you'll slam into the tree instantly. If you don't see the trees, or you kind of look at the path itself, you'll get through. You won't even know what the trees were. So it's what you choose to focus on. If you choose to focus on the negative stuff, oh my God, it will crush you. You'll never even move. You'll be done, because life it's got so much, negative going on. And funny enough, the media, social media, but the media in general, loves to emphasize the negative. When you turn on the TV, you kind of mostly hear about the negative stuff. And
Yeah.
this positive doesn't make it into the news. They love drama because that's what people unfortunately focus on and kind of pay attention to. But I think if you focus on the positive, which a lot of times I tell people, don't even look at the TV. Just try to let's isolate specific positive things and create a list of things that you want to focus on. But that's so true. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at the negative stuff, oh my God, it will overwhelm your mind, because our mind is like a sponge. We kind of take that stuff and we process it. We create our own perception of everything, where sometimes it's totally untrue, totally not even close to what reality is. And that's what cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is. We kind of say, listen, let's analyze each of our thoughts, isolate them, break them down, and say, how true is this realistic? Is this rational, what you're thinking? Is it really based on the reality?
Mm-hmm.
Which is so helpful to, like I said, the veterans or fighters or anybody that starts to question their own purpose in the world and what's going on around them. it's completely, sometimes, most of the time, it's completely irrational and totally untrue. And when they realize that, they suddenly have this complete switch in their attitude. But when you mentioned before that one positive word to somebody, one positive smile,
Mm-hmm.
talk about the veterans, sometimes it's a matter of life and death, because some days they wake up, and it's not a constant thing. It's something that changes day to day. One day they wake up, they're cool, whatever, just go on. Next day they wake up and like, why am I even getting out of bed? I don't have anything. I'm nobody. Look, I'm a failure. So it's how you perceive it, and if you go with it and you say, what, let's develop this line of thinking. Oh my God, it could take you. In the case of veterans, it could take you to the brink of irreversible loss. It can really destroy you. Some of us, most of us that don't have that type of PTSD experience, we can get through the day, have a bad day, like you said, and then wake up the next day and go on and have a better day. They are not the same. The veterans are so much into action that they act upon what they feel, and that's not. Sometimes it's quite deadly. You know what I mean? And that's why
Yeah.
we kind of try to change their mental process. I want to mention one other thing that kind of came to me. What George St. Pierre said. It's interesting about the discipline. He mentioned one thing about discipline, and because you talk about hard work, and we were talking, and one interesting aspect of George is that he's so dedicated, so focused. But he said, you're gonna have good days, you're gonna have bad days.
Yeah.
None of that matters. None of that matters. All you need is discipline. In other words, if you know what you got to do today, you have to like map it up and say, today I'm gonna. No matter how I feel, if you have a discipline to do something, it totally takes away your feeling of positive or negative. It makes no difference. Stick to discipline. Have a routine, have a disciplined day, and then when you have a routine, then it overcomes everything else. You know what I mean? And that's interesting. Kind of stuck to me with the question of developing a routine, developing disciplined approach to your days, which is not easy. It's easier said than done, but I think that's a lot of times it's the answer to a lot of questions, especially for these guys, such as veterans and former fighters.
That's so true, and it makes me think when you say that. It makes me kind of think of when I was like a teenager, right? I mentioned that I have like a lot of depression in my family. Most of the people that I grew up with, in my family, they would all, they claim depression, right? Depression, we're depressed. It runs in our family, right? And like for me, like I'll say to a lot of people that I don't really like. I think depression is a state of mind, and when I say that, like I don't mean it in the sense that there's not chemical imbalance, because I acknowledge that there can be genetic things that happen to you, right? Like it can be familial, it can be in your family, it could be a result of your dopamine levels being messed up, it can be a result of addiction. That there's a lot of things that can create depression, and it's a real thing, right? It's like I'm not denying that depression exists and that it can be quantified and looked at in a laboratory and shown to be a thing.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, it's about how, like, what you choose to do with that. It's, do you say, okay, I'm depressed and basically there's nothing I can do, and you just lay in bed all day? Or
Yep.
do you say, I'm depressed, I feel absolutely awful today, but I'm going to get up, I'm going to make my bed, I'm going to put my shoes on, I'm going to go through the motions, and I'm just going to pray that tomorrow when I wake up it's a better day.
Yep.
And that's exactly what you just hit on, that you're saying GSP kind of referred to, right? Is that it,
Absolutely.
regardless of how you feel today, it's just about getting up and going through the motions, sometimes just having that discipline to force through anyway.
Exactly. And army guys know this very well. Like, hey, you don't feel good today? Great. Get the hell out there and do what you got to do. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they. So, but that same mental approach could really get them through to problems today. It's just a matter of saying, what am I going to do? So it's all how you approach it and how you kind of go with it. And but what you mentioned about depression, what's a lot of people don't understand, there are levels to it. In other words, there's some
Sure.
so-called mild depression, and there's actually chronic, and there's some serious levels of depression. But what's important to know is that each level of depression has to be dealt with on the therapy level, and just some more serious ones require medication, of course, but the ones that are chemically imbalanced, but still has to be therapeutically approached and kind of like change the mindset, change the way you approach things, the way you look at it, with the help of medicine in that case. But it's never good
Yeah.
to just simply take medicine and say, oh, yeah, I'm good now. No, you're not, because what happens is the medicine will wear off, and the next day what happens when you run out of medicine, and that's what happens a lot of times. You see in society where people do irrational things we don't understand. A lot of times it's coming off of basically mental imbalances that are not treated, that are not really dealt with. And part of the reason why I focus so much on mental health today and trying to help as many people as possible is I think that there's a lot of it in the society today where it's mental health is looked at as there's still a bit of stigma where people don't want to admit. And a lot of times my biggest advice to people that feel that they may have certain issues with mental health is to speak up, to really deal with it, to look for help, even if it's anonymous, whatever it is. But never think that let me suffer in silence. Let me just be by myself. Let me process my problems on my own and then go on. Some people can, but a lot of people cannot. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing is to overcome the stigma. I work with this company. I don't know if you saw it. It's called Compel America, which initially was doing anti-bullying type of work and then spread more into mental health awareness. Where because we found that basically everything kind of stems from the same issue of not treating mental health issues, sometimes completely minor, sometimes quite serious, but all the same is a matter of addressing it, because a lot of it, much like many diseases, if you kind of treat it early on, if you treat the actual absolute root of the problem, you can eliminate it. You can make it, you can get control of it. You can deal with it where it completely is within your grasp, within your control. If you let it go, oh my God, some people can take it to different levels where it's completely incomprehensible to others. We don't even understand why people
Mm-hmm.
do certain things. One of the fighters I mentioned before, Don Fry, was sharing an episode. He said, one of his things was when he came home, he could not adjust back to the environment. He flew from Japan. He could not fight anymore. He had problems with his marriage. His wife was leaving him. It was just his whole life fell apart. And at one time, I'm not sure what happened exactly, but for some reason, either his wife or someone else called the police, and called on him, and like they came in to either talk to him or arrest him. I don't know what happened, but he said he literally walked out and he said, shoot me, or I don't care. I do not care. Shoot me." So that when that happens, you think about the state of mind of a person, right? Who would come out and say that? It becomes a level of such progression of his mental state where being shot is preferable to not being shot.
Yeah.
It's amazing, but it's funny. It doesn't happen overnight. There's a progression of step by step by step. If you kind of catch it early on and you deal with it and you explore it and you kind of try to overcome it could be taken under control. It will never reach those critical levels, and obviously those are extremes. But it's so prevalent in society today that I really want to focus on. And again, like I mentioned to you, my work in the business, but my goal over the next few years is to dedicate myself totally to mental health. Not only do I enjoy it, but I feel like it's so much more rewarding and so much more purposeful in today's world, man. It's just there's nothing more important than helping people and coming. And I think also I feel like I am people have a certain calling in life, and I feel like this may be mine. I don't know, because I feel like I can have. I've noticed in my own work that I have, let's say, 10 sessions in a row, and it does not like it doesn't make me. It makes me want to do more.
Yeah.
Whereas some people might feel more emotionally and physically exhausted. I love it. I love every bit of it. When I go to my practice places where I practice and I work with, there's a business element to it where they tell you it's supposed to be 45 minutes and you have to stop and next session blah 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 blah. So I'm always there's always a knock on the door and say you got to stop, and I can't. I so enjoy talking to people. I so enjoy helping people that I forget. I don't even know what the clock is. It's like I go. I love it because I think like there's nothing more exciting and more interesting than exploring what people are all about and trying to help them change. Help them change that perspective we spoke about. And by the way, in case of veterans, in case of former fighters, it's so rewarding to see that when that actually happens, when when they kind of switch and then they tell you things that are completely different in their own mind. I love it. That moment, that switch is priceless, and I would do it actually just for that moment. I mean, it's totally incredible to
Mm-hmm.
see that, because you feel like not only you changing one person's life, but consequentially you're changing all the lives of people that they interact with and will affect later on. It's like a geometrical progression. It's totally incredible to me. The most rewarding thing in the world.
Yeah, there's a couple things you touched on. One, I think it's really important to emphasize, right? Like where I was kind of talking about depression being a mindset, as you mentioned, right? There's obviously there are different levels because your mindset can reach such a bad place that it's not a problem that you can just dig yourself out of sometimes. So
Correct.
sometimes like everybody, no matter how strong we are, no matter how disciplined we are, no matter what we like, sometimes you just need help. It's just part of being human, right? And I think that's really important to acknowledge, that if you are in one of those places where you can't see the light, you can't see anything, those are those moments where you have to break down that stigma, as you mentioned, and just reach out to someone.
Ask for
If
help.
no one's
A lot
reaching
of
out to
people
you,
don't
yeah,
know where. Yeah, but they don't know where sometimes. You know what I mean? It's what the
sure,
shame is. Because today, if you kind of think about it, where would you go? Who do you call? You call a psychologist. There's a lot of process. When it comes to veterans, by the way, the veterans are almost ashamed, and they say, because they've been trained for many, many years not to show weakness, not to show
yeah,
emotions.
yeah,
And they feel like there's going to be paperwork, there's going to be something written somewhere, but they're going to be classified as crazy. And they use the word. And a lot of people in society don't want to call anyone. They don't know who to call. They don't want to be labeled or registered. They don't want to be looked at as someone with a problem. But it's so untrue. It could be so minor that, like I said, if you catch it early on, but there's no reason to label someone crazy or difficult or with mental issues, because that the very word itself has negative connotation. This guy is
mm-hmm.
mental. It's so wrong to say that, because think about it. So let's help this person, and he'll in turn will start helping everybody else. Rather, look at the alternative. He'll develop that mental illness to the levels where it becomes actually dangerous and affects everybody else in the world and society. What's better? I mean, and that's why I really feel that the stigma is, and that's why it's so important with a lot of celebrities or fighters, or anybody else, actors, speak up on this topic. And that's why you see me a lot of times pulling fighters and other celebrities into to doing like an interview, or to just actually speak up on the topic. Because when they do and other people hear that and they see that, it becomes less of a shame, less of a stigma to
Yeah,
discuss. And they suddenly say, well, let me look into myself. Let me seek help. Who do I call? And that's one of the reasons why we did this, started an organization. I work with it, Compel America, is to say, here, just call us. You don't need anything. You don't need to tell us your name, nothing. Call, you got a problem. You think you have a mental health issue. Call up and deal with it. There's no money. There's nothing. And that's to me, that's the approach that should really be in the same. I think the government, everybody else, should sponsor the type of approach and recognize it, and let it grow, because I think we actually would have a better, society that we live in overall.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And yeah, it's just price. It's just a lot of work, believe it or not. But I mean, like I said, it's the most rewarding thing in the world, and we need it more. You look at the younger kids, also, right? The kids that are in school and coming out. We've never had this type of level where kids of 15-year-old and other children that are literally you look at the person as a child. You're already talking about depression, talking about different levels of the things
mm-hmm.
we've never even thought about before. It kind of speaks for the society, and it's something we have to deal with. It cannot be left on its own, because we see the results sometimes.
Yeah. For you, like if you had to give a piece of advice, or like, if there's a message like that you could pass on to someone that's currently going through like a mental health issue, or is depressed, or feels stuck, or just anything along those lines, like what do you think I know it's probably hard to break down to like one most important thing, but if there's a couple of things, like what do you recommend to someone in that situation?
Precisely what you said, actually. Seek help.
Yeah.
Do not be afraid to seek help. And sometimes what's interesting, you may not be visible right away what that help is.
Hmm.
Look around some more. My work has been into making those resources available to anybody that needs them. But that's obviously it's going to take time. But in the meantime, don't think that you can overcome those problems on your own. Exactly. I'm just actually repeating what you said, but you're 100% on point. Don't um, don't seek don't be afraid to seek help. In other words, help is out there. Don't try to overcome those problems on your own because sometimes they're too much. And when you try to lift too great of a weight on your own, you can just really break yourself even further. It's like it's really no different than trying to lift 300 pound a stone. If you have 3 4 guys doing it, it's not a big deal. If you have one guy trying to do it, it seems impossible. Really similar to that, you know. What I mean, and there's a popular saying: a prisoner cannot get out of prison on his own. He needs someone on the outside to help him.
Hmm.
And that's really no different here because mental health a lot of times is almost like a prison where you're like a prisoner within yourself, within your own perceptions. And in order to get out, sometimes you need help of another person. So my advice will always be seek help. Call me. Like I always make, and that's what I've been working on. I said, listen, I don't even want to know your name. I don't want to know nothing. Seek help. Seek help. And there's people out there. Believe. One other thing I want to mention is believe that there's other people out there that want to help you. Because most of the people you come across, unfortunately, today are the ones that don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care. But there are people out there that do care. So look for those people. Look for the don't give up and actually look for people that will help. Because once you come across and you discover that resource, it will change your life. You know what I mean? And that's my advice. Do not accept reality as the only possible option. There are other options. There's always other options. And
Yeah.
that's the point.
That's great. That's great advice. And you mentioned, so like, tell me a little bit about, like, I know you said there's kind of a project that you're working on now. Do you want to talk about that a little bit or?
Oh, it's funny you say project. There's always projects. There's
Yeah.
always something going
Yeah.
on. One of them is, like I said, I work with this organization called Compel America, which is trying to make mental health resources available to all. And that's one. But one other interesting project we just started recently because again I'm still in technology, I'm still in the marketing. We came up with an idea to create a technology, almost an app probably, which will basically enable people to reach out exactly as you just said, look for mental health, we'll look for advice, we'll look for connection with somebody um, through the technology, through an app that basically will enable people to anonymously seek help and anonymously kind of like reach out to someone who may be on call at that time. And it's
Mm.
interesting, I've spoken to some of these fighters, some of these celebrities who said they will gladly be on the other side. In other words, it's going to be where a guy like George St. Pierre or guys like in a similar position will be online and saying between 4 and 6, they will respond to people that need that type of motivation, that type of help. So I wanted to do that, but besides that, there's always something I'm working on. Like I'm trying to basically, but the general direction is trying to make um, those types of resources available to more and more
Hmm.
people, and to eliminate stigma. Like whatever I'm doing, I'm trying to bring technology into it because that's a way to reach more people, literally worldwide. So hopefully that project will take off. I'm trying to do that right now. But even on a local basis, on a manual basis, I'm trying to literally, and I can only do so much during the day because of my available time. But I'm trying to build it more where other counselors, other mental health professionals will join in and offer to work with people on a broader basis and with less paperwork, less procedural stuff, because that's what it is in psychology and mental health. A lot of it is paperwork. A lot of it is documents, uh, and I think a lot of many times that precludes people from seeking help because they're like, I don't want to create a paper trail. I don't want to be involved in this whole process. Even tell my insurance, like, I don't want to be in that whole game.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I work on today has to do with eliminating that and just saying, you know what, no, it should not be. Should be an open thing, and just whenever, anybody, anytime, anywhere, make that happen. So I'm working on technology to do that, but I'm also working hands-on in my area in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, trying to get more counselors, more professionals to join in and offer a more comprehensive type of a network feel where people could just go and seek help. You know, I think it's so important.
Yeah. I think that is really, really, really important because, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes people just don't know where to go, or there seems to be a lot of barrier to access. And it's,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's like the healthcare system in general. No one wants to deal with the healthcare system in America because it's just so broken. And
Yeah.
as broken as it is, it's like the mental health side is even harder because you're trying to find somebody in network, and is there a copay or is it covered? And
Exactly.
how do I get a referral to somebody? And
You get so crazy, you're like, oh man,
yeah,
forget about it. I don't want to deal with it. I'll be
yeah,
good tomorrow.
yeah,
But no, it's not. It's not that simple. And like you said, like even in your own example, sometimes you need help. Sometimes you want to talk to somebody. Sometimes there's family related issues, whatever else. There's so much, it never ends. And it's just a matter of facing your own demons, so to speak. Recognizing you got to recognize sometimes that you need help, that you are in prison, as I mentioned, by comparison, and that's okay.
yeah.
It's okay. You are who you are. You are where you are today. It doesn't matter. You can't change um, circumstances. Sometimes you can only like react to circumstances a certain way with a positive approach, or completely negative and just succumb to circumstances. And that's always a choice. It's interesting. It's always a choice, man. You can choose to do what the way you can choose to structure today one way or the other, and then that determines tomorrow. But there's always, like, I don't know, maybe it's just my positive nature. I always feel like there's this that you have the next move, so to speak. Like, next move is on you, and that's the advantage always. You have the next move. Like, close your eyes, forget about everything that happened before. You got the next move, and don't think that you don't. Like, when the moment you kind of put yourself in that frame of mind, let's reset. What's my next move? And there's always, it could change in a heartbeat. Like, everything could be completely different
Hmm.
if you approach. Sometimes you just don't see it. It cannot be. It's like a veil over your eyes. And I don't know if you remember back in the day, we had those three-dimensional pictures, so you have to look at it for an hour before you actually see what's going on, before you
Hmm.
see the actual 3D picture, whatever. There's no difference. Sometimes you stare at something, you're like, well, there's nothing there. There's nothing I can do. And then you look at it longer, 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 and then you're like, oh my God, I didn't see that before. It's right there. It's right there. It's interesting. It's all, our minds are the most complex things ever created by God, because I think this
Yeah.
is like totally income. We're still learning about it, and we still don't know what makes us tick, right? That's why it's so interesting of a field.
Yeah. No, the whole consciousness thing is just, it's like a whole nother rabbit hole because we know it exists, we know it's there, but like no one even has a
No one truly
beginning.
knows it.
Yeah. No one even has an idea of like how to quantify or really explain this
Not at all.
experience of consciousness that just kind of comes together somehow out of all these like chemical reactions and biological processes and um,
Still don't know. To this day, they still can figure out the brain, right?
yeah.
You can today they can take a heart of one person, put it in another person. They can attach limbs from one person, but they still don't understand the brain fully. And what makes like I said, the subconscious is that's what psychology focuses on. The way that subconscious works and affects the way you are, and the way what some things that you suppress into your subconscious, how it affects your behavior. Because everything, no matter what you know or don't know, your behavior and the way you feel always is an indicator of what's in the back of your mind, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. What I learned is sometimes you have to. It's like a little trash can that you have up here. Sometimes you have to empty it. Sometimes you have to empty the trash can and clear your mind and refocus and kind of like get back to working positively. And that's always the message. I love talking to people that have overcome adversity, have overcome difficult things, because you
Hmm.
learn so much from them, how they did it. You learn about their behavior, what makes them tick, what makes them go forward. I love these conversations. I have a lot of more interviews that I've set up, and I want to continue doing, because to me that's like it's a never-ending thing. It's something that can never be fully understood, but could be, you can explore, and it's, each time you kind of like you discover the new layer, and it's so amazing to me. You can, it never stops. It's a learning process that never ends.
Yeah.
I love it every step.
I wanted to ask you too. I have a series of questions I kind of like to ask all my guests, and uh, just to kind of profile some of the thinking and some of the things they've been through. Like for you personally, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of people that are going through, you know, difficult times and depression, things like that. Have you ever had like a very dark or transformational kind of moment in your life? And you know, if so, I mean, do you mind talking a little bit about that and just kind of what you went through?
I'll be honest with you. So that kind of speaks about myself. In other words, I have always been um, a totally incurable optimist. In other words, I'm so optimistic that I've had things where things didn't work and things kind of like fell apart, and including sometimes difficult days in my marriage, all kinds of stuff, and professionally. I think that's probably why I went into this mental health field, is because I quickly reset, and kind of like I don't allow anything negative to stay too long.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, no, not really, because I never allow anything truly negative to develop and take shape. So, but for the same reason, unfortunately, sometimes it takes too long for me to recognize that I have to explore something different, or to make the change, like, or to go into different, like, it took me time to go into mental health field more on a full-time basis, because I no matter how difficult something seemed, even in the business or professionally otherwise, I'm like, okay, I can deal with it, I can overcome it, I can beat it, and always kind of like recover, which is good and bad at the same time. But no, to answer your question, not really something explosive that transformed my entire life. No, I call those things life quakes. In other words, an earthquake that changes your life. These
Hmm.
life quakes. Now, I see people. I deal with people that have them. It's easy to recognize. Me myself, I don't believe I did. I faced a problem in my marriage a few years ago, and I said, you know, well, it's almost like a project that I got to work on, and I successfully kind of work through it. It's something that I guess is like part of me, where I don't, how do I say, like, I never have this pessimism, or I never have this feeling that I cannot do something. I just say, you know, let me reset. One thing I did not mention, I play chess quite a bit, and I used to be almost a professional level back in the day. So I always look at something, and just I realize that sometimes it takes more time, takes me longer to analyze something, and then when I initially don't see a solution, and then when I spend more time, I look at the same situation, I do see a solution. So I kind of approached everything in my experience the same way, you know, you just kind of like
Hmm.
overcome things and never allow the negative stuff to develop too far.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense to me. I think that's the way to be, right? Is to try to just kind of
Yeah,
embrace the things that happen and treat them as, you know, problems on a chessboard that, you know, we need to sit down and kind of analyze and think through, versus like some kind of existential threat to who we are or our existence.
absolutely. And that's what it is. Like, it's just a matter of spending the time. Unfortunately, we don't always have time like that. Sometimes things are happening much quicker. But yeah, in my experience, I don't want to sound like, you know, I think I'm lucky in the fact that I have this type of attitude, and that's why I want to share it with other people, and
Yeah.
kind of more of share the fire of positivity. Sometimes too positive, maybe. If there's such a thing.
What about you know, we've talked a little bit about like discipline and things too. Do you have any like personal habits that, you know, you go through every day, or like what kind of structures do you have in your life?
I'll tell you, number one, and I've had this for a long time now. Early wake ups. I feel like that's the number one requirement, and that's one of my biggest um, points that I tell everybody else, and I tell myself. You got to wake up early, and you got to do the most important things early in the day. And like you gotta, whatever it is, you have to be the morning, even if you're not a morning person, to become a morning person. Why, I don't know, but it feels like it's like a different biological cycle that we have in the mornings, and I
Hmm.
think we can set our whole day differently if we kind of approach things. You know, wake up early and set yourself more into work mode early on in the day. I think that's really the number one thing in terms of discipline. Sometimes physically, it's not an easy thing to do, especially as you get older. You know what I mean? But I think it's just something that to me is a no brainer. Like you got to do that. You got to wake up early and spend time in the beginning part of the day focusing yourself on what's going to happen today. One
Yeah.
other thing I learned, also another thing that I practice all the time, discipline wise, is before you go to sleep, like before you end the day, to write down anything that's truly bothering you, like what's truly bothersome thing to you. Do you foresee becoming a major problem tomorrow, the next few days? Write it down on a piece of paper. And that's one of the techniques actually in the mental health field, is that a lot of things that are on our minds, the moment you put them down on paper, the moment you take them away from your mental, from your mind, into making it more tangible, you write it down or you at least email it to yourself. But I found that it's so, makes you so much more productive, and it takes away a lot of the anxiety that you may otherwise have, and start with, because a lot of times we overthink things that are not necessarily that complicated, and that's what happens. So I learned that that's my second trick, is I kind of like, I try to write down it, or at least email to myself some of the things that I foresee being difficult. But those are my two main kind of like discipline and two main routine things. And again, listen, uh, easier said than done, right? Sometimes life gets in the way,
Hmm.
and you you can't do that, you can't do this, you can do that, you forget to do whatever. But there are exceptions to the rule. But I think that I believe in rules. Like I believe in creating certain rules. Sometimes you get away from it, something happens, whatever. Well, guess what? You know what to come back to the next day. Like you know what the routine should be. I believe in. It's funny, and I created actually a while back. I created a 5 a.m. runner type of website and a blog, because I used to get up at 5 and run, and that's how I lost a lot of weight back in the day. Then, and I really don't run anymore as much, but I still wake up at 5, and occasionally I run, but most of the time I spend time trying to see what I got to do in the day, which things I have to do by the earliest hours as possible. Like what I'm going to accomplish, because I found that like after a certain time, you lose productivity, and other people will get in the way, other things will get in the way, and you will
Hmm.
not accomplish it. And nothing makes you more anxious and more um, negative or possibly pessimistic than knowing you could have done something, you didn't get to it, it still weighs on your mind. So it's all about planning, you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
found those things to be important.
Yeah. I really like that idea of just writing down, something that you're kind of afraid of or perceive to be a major issue. That's a new one, but it makes a lot of sense that you kind
Yeah,
of
it's one of the most important things.
symbologically like take it. I don't even think that's a word, symbologically, but you symbolically
Symbolically,
take,
you take it
yeah.
out of your mind and
Yeah.
put it on paper. It
Yeah.
becomes tangible in this world versus your subconscious versus. That's what I mean by emptying your trash can up here.
Yeah.
Let somebody else worry about it. You know about, I don't know if you know about this joke where a um, guy sleep, goes to sleep, and his wife is like, "Why are you tossing and turning? What's wrong with you?" He's like, tells his wife, "Oh my God, I owe this guy, our neighbor, I owe him $10,000. I have no idea what to do. I don't know how to live, how to go about tomorrow." She's like, "I can solve your problem in 2 seconds." She goes to the window, opens the door. "Hey, John, my husband is not going to pay you $10,000. Bye bye." He said, "Okay, now it's his problem." You know what I mean? It's like you
Hmm.
empty your mind. You put him, you gave it. So the problem now is on that guy. Now that guy thinks, "How am I going to get my 10,000?" It's like, "I'm not going to pay you. That's it." So you kind of like emptied your mind, and you put it into real world. So you're
Yeah.
no longer worried about it. It became real. So I think on a simple level, you can write it down, or just even like make a note on your iPhone or email it to yourself and then delete it. But the moment you did it, it's magical. It's magical.
What about like book recommendations? If you had to pick out, like two books to recommend to somebody, what would they be?
It's funny that you mentioned one of them is Viktor Frankl,
Mm-hmm.
Man's Search for Meaning. One of my always biggest recommendations to
Yeah.
everybody. It's amazing that you brought it up because I think it's really important for one to read.
I agree. Yeah.
There's another book. I cannot remember who the author is. There's a book called Red Ocean, Blue Ocean. It's more about business, however, but it's actually very good psychologically because it talks about sometimes when we have how to overcome difficult moments in the processes in our own minds. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, like when you see something is impossible, but you keep beating yourself against that wall, and the question becomes, how do I overcome that? So sometimes it talks about the fact that you can look for alternative solutions. You can arrive to the same point, but you can go around the wall instead of beating your brain against the wall. But it's amazing that I try to when it comes to reading, I actually don't. I focus on a lot of times reading fiction because I try to get my mind to run around and explore things that seem impossible, but I'm kind of like want to expand my go outside the box. So I love reading actually Dan Brown. I don't know if you know that author.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I find him to be one of the most talented people of all times. It's truly incredible the way he writes. So I like his writing style, and I enjoy reading all of his books. If you want to look at some of the early books called Angels and Demons. There was another one, the Da Vinci Code, but there was a lot of later works that he has done. I find it totally fascinating. But it's funny enough, you talk about reading. I wish I had more time to read. One of my favorite activities. There's no
Yeah.
time. There's no time. This is all from the past. And so, it's something I would love to do. Something I would like to wake up and have a perfect day. That would be one of the things I would do. Read more.
Yeah.
Don't get a chance to do that.
Yeah. Well, you still have time, right? Like someone told you, don't let 10 years go by and look back and be like, I wish I would have read more. So
Absolutely, but I focus so much on this work and especially with mental health. Like I basically
yeah, you make
want to do
decisions
more.
on where you want to spend your time or where you want to best use your time. Makes sense.
Exactly, yeah. But I'm telling you, my perfect day would be actually focusing on talking to people, and dealing with people, and just working all day
Yeah.
with that, and then reading, writing as an additional benefit of that. But yeah, unfortunately now I have to mix business work and my mental health work.
Sure.
That's a difficult combination. It's funny, a lot of times people don't understand how difficult it is to switch from being in business and being in the mental health counseling because those are two opposite mindsets. In business, you have to be more aggressive, you have to be more taken over, you have to be more driving, you have to be more of a push forward type of guy. And I think in counseling, it's important to understand is that you have to be more of a listener. You have to be more of an open book. You have to really take
Mm-hmm.
in what people have, and that's what I enjoy doing more. That's why business, I'm usually good with it, but I do not enjoy a single moment of business work, of my work that I do to make money. I,
Yeah.
I, I, I don't want to use the word hate, but I despise every single moment of that time. And I look forward to the time where I can, for free, I can work with mental health
I understand.
clients and do stuff with that. What a life, right?
Yeah.
Never it's an interesting thing. But again, I'm hopeful that if I keep pushing forward, I can accomplish what I actually want to do and be in that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely sounds like you're heading in that direction. So sounds like you're going to get there. And
Absolutely.
then, so the last question I had for you today, I always like to ask this to my guests. This is kind of the tough one. Sometimes it stumps people a little bit. I feel like you'll have a good answer, ready for us. But if you could go back in time, talk to a teenage version of yourself, kind of knowing the things that you know now, whatever. Um, if you could go back and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
Uh, isn't it like the most quintessential question that everyone wishes to do, right? And I
Yeah,
go back 20, 30 years,
yeah,
talk to the younger version of myself. The problem is the younger version of myself would not listen to this guy.
yeah.
They say, "Get the hell away from me."
That's what
I would
everybody
tell
says.
them, well, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I know
Yeah,
better. No, but if I could, I would go back to that guy 25 years ago, whatever, rolling on the floor with Hoist Gracie, like I said, and doing stuff, and tell him to be more open-minded and actually pursue what you want to do. In other words, my younger years, I was less decisive and more stuck on this, whatever I think is the only options are.
Mm-hmm.
Not really going for what I enjoy doing, but doing what's more like expected, and pursuing what I thought is the right thing to do. Whereas I kind of felt for a long time that my calling is somewhere else and what I should be doing is something else. But I was too afraid to pursue it. So I would tell that younger version to not be afraid to step away from the beaten path, and pursue what you actually want. Sit down and analyze in
Mm-hmm.
your own mind what do you want to, what is it that you want to do? What do you see yourself, as with the famous question in the job interviews, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because I kind of knew that even back then, but I was like, it's really impossible. So let me just stick to what I'm doing. No, I would tell him to explore what he truly wants to do and pursue it, and don't wait. Do not wait 20 years. You're still young. You know what I mean? So don't look at anything else. Sit down and pursue exactly what you want to do. Which I'm telling myself right now. Forget
Yeah.
about 20 years ago, but if I could go back, I would gain another 20 years and do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would be a dream, but I cannot go back in time yet until they develop time machine. I gotta work here. So, but that's the same message. It's the same message. I think that's important.
Yeah. Beautiful message. It's I've had I've had a lot of like pretty much all the answers I've gotten so far have stuck along the same lines, which are either, you know, keep going, just keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get there. Everything will be okay kind of answer. Or, the other answer is like, hey, make a little bit better use of your time, or the other answer that I've gotten also is like, kind of like you said, follow your heart, do the things that are meaningful to you. Don't listen to what other people say so much. I think those are like the big three answers I've seen. So,
I think
um,
so. Believe in yourself.
yeah.
And another person that we spoke about before, about heroes, so to speak, and guys like GSP. Another person that GSP actually considers his own hero is Hoist Gracie that I mentioned. I think they're making a movie about Hoist Gracie right now because of 30 years of the UFC.
Awesome.
That's one person you will look into.
Yeah.
One person I found the most inspiring, also besides GSP, is that guy. Look into him more. He's so impressive.
Yeah.
There's so much belief because he's not a fighter. It's interesting. People don't know about Hoist Gracie. He was never meant to be a fighter.
Yeah, they chose him out of the family because he was like the smallest, like weakest.
But he's not a
Yeah.
fighter, right? He
Yeah.
does not want to fight. He's like, he hates fighting, and he loves jiu-jitsu, but he hates fighting. So he was never supposed to be. But he overcame himself. He was talking about his own struggles mentally to believe in himself because he's very confident when he's outspoken, but deep inside, and I had conversation, he's most um, he doubted himself a lot, and it's
Yeah.
interesting character to think how he overcame himself, became what he really is not meant to be, and became that anyway. So
Yeah.
that's really inspiring, something to look into.
For sure.
Yeah,
Well, Mike, I think I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I really enjoyed
sure.
speaking with you today. Are there any any like links or profiles or anything you want to mention for somebody if like someone wants to get in touch with you or find out more about your work?
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, I think Compel America is really the most important thing on my agenda today, right now,
Okay.
and it's compelamerica.org, um, and which you can include in your if you post this thing. But I think it's really important for people to have access to, and I continue every day to make that more and more accessible to people and increase the outreach and increase the resources that are dedicated to it. So I think you want to encourage people to keep that in mind and have available at their fingertips when they kind of think about it, because hopefully, even if we change the life of one or two people, it's already worth it. But I think it's going to change many, many more lives. But
Yeah.
that's the one, compelamerica.org. And on social media, it's Compel America all over the place, on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere else. And for people to look into it and keep in mind and have available at all times.
Awesome. Well, Mike,
Yeah.
thank you again so much for coming on and speaking with me today. And hope you have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. I truly appreciate the opportunity. It's really been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so
Likewise.
much, Shane.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Renaissance Wisdom podcast, and hopefully you learned at least one lesson on today's episode. Our mission here is to uncover practical wisdom to create a better way of living for our audience. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us by leaving the show a review on your podcast platform of choice and by giving it a share on social media. This really helps us to grow our audience and to continue to add more episodes. If you are interested in learning more, please check out our website at RenaissanceWisdom.com or check out the book that started it all, Renaissance Wisdom, How to Flourish in the Modern Day, now on Amazon. Thank you again, and may wisdom be your guide.